Hi, parents. Today we are fortunate to have Issac Hoch come and speak to us parents from Quebec about how to access government programs and tax credits for our children who have ADHD, learning disabilities, and autism.
The slide here. So what is the disability tax credit? That's the question. So the disability tax credit, it's a non-refundable credit, which means that it depends on your taxes payable. So if you owe a certain amount of taxes to the government, this credit reduces your taxes payable. And if you owe, let's say, $2,000 to the government, you could save, you'll only owe $1,000. So it's a tax credit that reduces your taxes payable. Now it ranges, it depends on income, it depends on the age of the child, but usually we say it's around $1,500 to $1,600 a year. So that's a significant saving. And the key here is also it can go back retroactively. So if someone's child is 10 and they never heard about it, but the disability had started from when they were 2 or 3, then you can go back 7 years and you can get in one check, you can get 7 times 1,600, they would send that forward. So that's a significant amount of retroactive funds. And then moving forward, you would get it until either the child is 18, but really it's until the government approves it till. So sometimes they'll only give you, a 10-year span. That's what I see now. We've been getting a lot of applications. If there's a physical disability that's there for life, then many times they'll say, okay, you can have it for life. But when it comes to, what we'll say goes under mental health, ADD, ADHD, autism, ASD, many times the government will say, okay, we'll give it to you for a 10-year period, and then you'll reapply every 10 years. So they don't just give it to you for life. And this disability tax credit, if someone is not paying taxes, but is being supported by, let's say, their parents, so it's something we could look into too, is you could transfer it to supporting relatives. So if your parents help you out with cost, with kids, which happens a lot, you're able to still keep, access that credit through transferring it to supporting relative. So that, attached to that, there's something called the CDB, the Child Disability Benefit. So the regular benefit is the CB, is a child benefit, which it's can act depending on income, how much the government will send you. On top of that money, they'll also send you now, once you get a proof of the DTC, this comes automatically. And this is a little of an old slide. It's already up. I think it's around $230 now a month. That's the max. So you can be getting an extra $230 a month. And again, this benefit is also retroactive for up to 10 years. So you're looking at about about 2,500, a little more a year, which you can also go back retroactively. So it's a significant amount. If you have a 10-year-old child and you're going back 7 years, and you can get $2,500 a month retroactively, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars to help you towards therapy or anything you need. In case we just had this. Dylan is a 9-year-old. He was diagnosed with a strong learning disability in ADHD. That was the application that we sent. The family income was $120,000. So they were paying taxes. It was a family of 4 children. And he was approved for the disability tax credit retroactively from 2013. So the tax credit portion was 2013 to present was $6,577. These were real numbers. This is what the family received. And the child disability benefit retroactively was $14,877. So their full retroactive payment, which they received literally last week, was $21,000. So we're talking about a significant amount of money. It really, really helps the parents. So I encourage everyone to at least try to get this application into the government. An extra $600 of COVID relief that they're sending to anybody who has the disability tax credit. It's an extra $600 that they sent automatically. If you didn't apply yet, you have to get in the application before December 31st. So you might write that down. If you can apply before December, as long as you get the application in before December 31st, you'll be eligible retroactive for that extra $600. It's not just for children, by the way. The disability tax credit is for any age. So if it's someone with an aging parent, they might not get the child benefit, but they're eligible for the disability tax credit. And there's also excuse me. There's also, you'll see government, there's other provincial benefits that they can get. So markedly restricted, this is the government definition, is a person is considered markedly restricted if all or substantially all the time, at least 90% of the time. That's the government, that's what the government writes. The courts still say 70 to 80%. I don't know how you can quantify that, what's 90, what's 70, but if it makes a difference in case law, it's still at 70 to 80%. That's what the court recognizes the definition. He or she is unable or requires an inordinate amount of time to personally manage daily functions, even with appropriate therapy, medications, and devices. That means even with therapy, even with the medications they're taking or whatever devices, it still takes them longer. With a learning disability, it was slight, but they also had an auditory processing disorder where in the classroom, the hearing level goes down. So under hearing and under mental functions, we were able to put the two together and get approved. Whereas if we would have went just with mental health by itself, it might not have been enough. So there's this is important to know about when you're creating the application to the government, that it's not, it might not be so severe, but if you're able to put two effects together, you're still able to make a claim. Okay, so now the question is what in the government, what they look for in mental functions. So they're looking at social interactions. So the question is, you had someone, and I took this right off the letter, a long identified learning disability, specifically in areas of receptive and expressive language. So if anyone sees this on the screen and says, oh, this is what they recognized from their evaluation or a psychologist's report, you could probably get approved. Significant social and behavioral challenges, language delays, weak memory, anxiety, restlessness, and stress. Now here, this wasn't even like a diagnosis, but this was something that came from a therapist's report, and we were able to put this all together. We had a personality disorder, behavioral issues, mental functions as a result of his specific learning disabilities in reading, language, comprehension, and his delays in processing, as well as behavioral emotional challenges. See, it's important to note that the government, what we look at is someone who has ADD or ADHD, we use that as an example. So many times you'll have in school, they have large issues. And people put these applications through and say they have trouble in school. But what the government wants is they want to know throughout the entire day. You have to look at an entire day. And we know that a child with ADD has that disability always. The question is where it affects him. So in school, usually affects him the most, but if it's just educational, it's probably not enough for the government. You have to look at the morning. And I'll get into this a little more with examples. Getting out of school, getting to school, getting dressed, getting ready for the bus, getting breakfast. Everything is a fight. Doing chores at home. Again, it comes with impulsive. When they get home, do they fall apart because school was too hard? So these are things you're looking at throughout the day, how the disability affected them, and that's the kind of that's what we're looking for throughout the whole day. So really, someone with ADD and ADHD or with autism, they're living with the disability all the time. And what we have to focus on when we're making the application to the government is the issues throughout the day, at home and at school, not just at school. It's at home, at school, at work, wherever they may be. So just a few more examples to look at. We have, the autism spectrum disorder, low average cognitive functions, examples down, and you'll send it in. Anxiety, OCD, ADHD, learning disabilities in reading, language disorder and anxiety. I'll just give you one more slide. This is a very common, ADHD, very common, comes with oppositional behavior. So if there's any oppositional behavior, usually that's throughout the entire day, you can probably get approved. Auditory processing disorder, severe language disability, with dyslexia, with ADHD. So that the actual form is called the T2201. Okay, now that's you could look it up online. That is the form. It's a 2-page form. There's a part A for the parent. No, it's a 6-page form. But there's a part for the parent, there's a part for the doctor. And you can do it again. You can do it with your doctor. All these government forms always have to be signed off by a doctor, because ultimately he's the one who's going to say if he'll sign off on the disability. A pediatrician or a family doctor can sign off on any form. A psychologist can sign off if there's a mental health issue. If it's a speech issue and it's a speech impediment, then you can have a speech therapist, sign off on it as well. If it's something related to physical, you can have an occupational therapist sign off on that. But if you have a family doctor that works with you, he can sign off for anything, for speech, for occupational. He can do anything. He can't give you a diagnosis of ADHD. You would need a psychologist for that, but he could sign off if you have so you're really looking, if you have a report from a psychologist, then either you can go to that psychologist or you can go to your family doctor, and you could bring him that report and say, if he knows what's going on, and you'll tell him what's going on in the home, you'll tell him what's going on behavioral wise, and hopefully he can make a comprehensive, he could fill out the form and you could send it in. What I do, I'll stick, just a little, I guess self-promotion, but what we do is I happen to do it as a business. Okay. So for me, I like when people do it on their own. It can actually make money on your own, then you don't have to pay my fee. But many times there's follow-up letters that come to the doctor. They don't know how to fill that out. We follow up on that. There's the tax end. You want to make sure, like, once you get approved, there's the retroactive portion. You can get in touch with the accountant. You can try to do it yourself. You want to make sure you're in touch with the government on the form. If you'll notice that there's a check that says if you want us to give you the retroactive, and most people will check off yes, but they don't automatically. I think they might give you 2-3 years automatically, but then you'll have to make a request to make sure that you're actually getting the retroactive. So you want to make sure that you're in touch with the government to make sure that you're getting everything that you deserve. So if someone gets approved and they get whatever money they get, and then they want us to have a look at it, we can. If someone gets denied, I wouldn't give up. You can give us a call. We could do appeals. It's not like a one shot and out. We've had people, we get denials all the time, and then we do appeals, we do follow-ups. And then if we know that they can get approved, we'll take it to them and we'll make sure it gets approved. So one thing, if you send it out and it gets denied, you could send it out again, send it out as many times. It doesn't hurt your application moving forward. So it's just important to note that if someone wants to try, they can still get in contact with us and we can try to help them. But I encourage someone to do it on their own. It's not that difficult, but it's government bureaucracy and paperwork. So what we do is we get on the phone with the doctors, we get on the phone with CRA for you. So that's just a little of what I do. Okay, so now just to run through, so that's on the federal side. So we spoke about, just to give you a little recap, we spoke about the disability tax credit. The form was the T2201. That's the form you're going to look to send in. That once you get approved for the DTC, you automatically are going to receive what's called the child disability benefit, which is an extra monthly supplement. Both the child disability benefit and the disability tax credit can be applied retroactively. If you're not paying taxes for the disability tax credit and you're being supported by a parent, you could transfer that to the parent so they can benefit from that as well. And in terms of who is eligible, I'm going to get into that into a little even more detail. But again, it's anyone with a physical disability, speaking, walking, hearing, dressing, feeding, and then mental health. That's the a little recap, and then I'll try to get into it a little more detail so everyone has a little more clarity in terms of who is eligible. So now we also have provincial benefits. So the first provincial benefit for children is the RRQ, is the Régie de Rente Quebec. Now, this is a supplement for children. It's different and is separate from the DTC. So I had a parent just call me yesterday that someone told them that if they get approved for the disability tax credit, they could just send it into the provincial government and they'll be able to get money for children. So that's a mistake. I think I know why he made the mistake, because there is another application for adults which you can send in the DTC, but then it's not the greatest idea. I'll get into that later, because you want to send the provincial form because you'll actually get more money that way. But this RRQ, it's a different application process and it has different criteria. Here on the board, I wrote, for instance, a child suffering from allergies might qualify for this credit. That's something people don't know. But the amount for the RRQ, it's actually, this was an older slide, I guess it's 180. Right now it's 190. So it's up $10. So it's 190. Now for the RRQ, it's important to note that this form, you could look it up online. It's the RRQ. If anyone needs it, I can send it to them. But it's a much harder application to get approved for, because for the federal government, for the disability tax credit, you just need a diagnosis. Even if that diagnosis is from 4 or 5 years ago, you can use that. We've used older diagnosis. We had, they went to psychologists when the child was 4. They were getting intervention. They're 9 years old now. They don't need a new psychologist report to be able to help the child. And you can use that for the federal government. But for the RRQ, they need everything updated. They need everything from the current. So, which makes it a little more challenging, because people are like, well, could I get approved? And the always question is, well, you need a new report. Is it worth $2,500 to get a new report? If you knew you're going to get approved, yes. So this is a gray area where even we still have trouble. If telling someone should or shouldn't they get everything updated. But if someone is in, they're in public school, they have reports, IEPs, you have, there's progress reports. The RRQ government body is looking for comprehensive intervention. So they want to see that their money is going to intervention. So they're going to ask for the IEP. So on this form, there's a parent part, there's a school part, there's a psychologist part. So it's a lot more than just one individual. So you have to go to the school, get their signature. You're going to need to go to the therapist. So it's a little more challenging, the RRQ. But and this only goes back retroactively 11 months. So on the retroactive portion, it's not as lucrative, but it's $190 a month. So it is a significant amount of money. And as long as someone has their file updated and they have the documentation and have the proof, and their kids are in current therapy and in current intervention, and you're able to get the report, so you'll have to bother your therapist, you'll have to bug the doctor, you'll have to bug the school. But it's definitely, if you have it, you have the IEPs, then you can go ahead and make this application to the G de Rente. If there's a physical disability, it's always easier because it's clear cut, right? The RRQ, what makes the difficult part is in mental health. You have to prove that there's intervention. So that's where, like, for allergies is like, I had someone they were very severely allergic. It was an easy file because everything was correct. You went to the allergist, they signed it and they sent it in. So it's the mental health one with someone who's struggling from it, let's say ADHD or ADD. That's where it's a little bit of a gray area. And as ourselves, we still struggle with it to try to get people approved because it's so difficult. But again, I think Linda has cases where people tried once, twice, 3 times, and on the 3rd time they got approved.
Absolutely. I was one of them.
Right. So this is, it's a little more difficult. So just, we wanted to be upfront with the challenges, so the challenge of the RRQ, but it's definitely something to try. And again, if you have everything current of the year, it's definitely worth a trial. And if you don't get approved, it doesn't mean you can't try again. So that's the RRQ. And then that's for children. Then for adults over 18, this is from it's called the amount for severe and prolonged impairment from the Revenue Quebec. That's the MRQ. This is much easier to apply for. Okay, this one can send in the federal disability tax credit approval, and they would get approved automatically. I don't suggest it. There is a form that one would fill out specifically for MRQ. So you can look up on the Revenue Quebec website for an adult with a disability. You could look up even these words: amount for severe and prolonged impairment, and you would fill in that form, because what happens is that there's if you look on the slide, there's a refundable, which means it's not income based. It means they'll send you a benefit for a caregiver of an aging parent or an adult child. So if you just send in the disability tax credit, they look at it as self, and you'll only get a $500 tax credit. But if you send in the government form, then it triggers the refundable tax credit, which is worth about $1,000. So you want to do it that way because it's more valuable for you. So if you have an adult child living at home, there is on the form, this is important, there's a form that says can't live on their own. Means they have to be, that they need to be living at home. So that's the thing that needs to be checked off to trigger this tax credit. So you'll go to the doctor, say, look, I have a child at home, he's 20 years old, he can't live on his own, and therefore you would be entitled to the caregiver credit. This amount can be applied retroactive up to 10 years. So this doesn't have a limit. It also has a 10-year limit. So therefore, if your child is 25, you can go back till 18. So that's a significant amount of money retroactively. What makes the difficult part is in mental health. You have to prove that there's intervention. So that's where, like, allergies is, like, I had someone they were very severely allergic. It was an easy file because everything was correct. You went to the allergist, they signed it, and they sent it in. So it's the mental health one with someone who's struggling from it, let's say ADHD or ADD. That's where it's a little bit of a gray area. And as ourselves, we still struggle with it to try to get people approved because it's so difficult. But again, I think Linda has cases where people tried once, twice, 3 times, and on the 3rd time they got approved.
Absolutely. I was one of them.
Right. So this is, it's a little more difficult. So just, we wanted to be upfront with the challenges, so the challenge of the RRQ, but it's definitely something to try. And again, if you have everything current of the year, it's definitely worth a trial. And if you don't get approved, it doesn't mean you can't try again. So that's the RRQ. And then that's for children. Then for adults over 18, this is from it's called the amount for severe and prolonged impairment from the Revenue Quebec. That's the MRQ. This is much easier to apply for. Okay, this one can send in the federal disability tax credit approval, and they would get approved automatically. I don't suggest it. There is a form that one would fill out specifically for MRQ. So you can look up on the Revenue Quebec website for an adult with a disability. You could look up even these words: amount for severe and prolonged impairment, and you would fill in that form, because what happens is that there's if you look on the slide, there's a refundable, which means it's not income based. It means they'll send you a benefit for a caregiver of an aging parent or an adult child. So if you just send in the disability tax credit, they look at it as self, and you'll only get a $500 tax credit. But if you send in the government form, then it triggers the refundable tax credit, which is worth about $1,000. So you want to do it that way because it's more valuable for you. So if you have an adult child living at home, there is on the form, this is important, there's a form that says can't live on their own. Means they have to be, that they need to be living at home. So that's the thing that needs to be checked off to trigger this tax credit. So you'll go to the doctor, say, look, I have a child at home, he's 20 years old, he can't live on his own, and therefore you would be entitled to the caregiver credit. This amount can be applied retroactive up to 10 years. So this doesn't have a limit. It also has a 10-year limit. So therefore, if your child is 25, you can go back till 18. So that's a significant amount of money retroactively. You have to live in the same house. For self and a spouse, if let's say someone who has the disability that can apply, it's not a benefit of $1,000 a year, it's non-refundable, which means that if you're paying taxes, it reduces your taxes payable. So it's a tax credit as opposed to a refundable benefit. So if someone has aging parents, spouse over 70, then they're able to get the $1,000 benefit as a caregiver. But if someone under 70, it becomes a credit, or for someone who themselves have disability, it's a credit. But if you are caring for either a spouse over 70, or you have your parent in your home, that some people have brought their aging parents in the home, or an adult child. So an adult child, so someone with autism, you would say they can't live on their own. If they're in a home, so then they don't give you the caregiver credit because they're outside of the home. It's someone who you have your adult child home with you, you're entitled to this credit. So that's the other. So provincial, there's the RRQ for children, which we said, which is a little bit of a harder criteria. You need everything current. You could send that in. And then the MRQ, this amount of severe and prolonged impairment, this works for, it's almost, you could say it's the same criteria as the federal. So it's not, you don't have all that, it doesn't have to be current. You just need to be, if one is approved for the disability tax credit, you can use that, or you can fill out the Quebec form, which
Isaac, thank you so much for sharing your insight and wisdom with us all.